When the Great Patriotic War began, millions of Soviet families faced an impossible choice: submit to the occupiers or flee to the forest and fight. Vasily Korakh's family from the Belarusian village of Borki chose the path of resistance. The father, mother, and 3 sons all became partisans. Their story shows how ordinary people became heroes, how family ties became a force capable of resisting the fascist machine of destruction. This is a story about what true love for one's homeland is, and how it manifests itself in the most difficult times. Subscribe to our channel to learn more amazing stories about the heroes of the Great Patriotic War. And in the comments, share your opinion. Could you, in such a situation, make the decision to join the partisans with your whole family, including children? What is more important, the safety of loved ones or the fight for the freedom of the motherland? Vasily Korakh lived an ordinary peasant life in the Belarusian village of Borki, in the Minsk region. 39 years old, he was a strong man, respected by his fellow villagers for his fairness and hard work. He was accompanied by his wife Maria, a woman of strong character, and 3 sons, Peter, Ivan, and Mikail. The eldest was 20, the youngest only 16. Life seemed to be going on as usual. The fields, the house, the family. But in 1938, dark clouds were gathering over Europe. Vasily, like many of his peers, had served in the Red Army and knew a thing or two about military affairs. Sometimes, sitting on the porch in the evenings, he would gaze thoughtfully at the western horizon. Maria noticed these glances, but remained silent. Her feminine intuition told her that hard times were coming. The Korakh family was typical of the Belarusian lands. They were strong, hard-working people who created prosperity through their labor. Vasily was known as a jack of all trades. He was a carpenter and a blacksmith. From childhood, his sons helped their father and learned crafts. The eldest, Peter, showed a particular aptitude for technology. He understood engines and repaired agricultural equipment. The village of Borki was surrounded by forests and swamps, which would soon play a fateful role in the family's destiny. These familiar paths, every bush and ravine, would become a battlefield. But for now, the forest was just a forest, a place for hunting and mushroom picking. In 1939, when the war with Finland began, Vasily was drafted. 4 months on the Karelian Isthmus showed him what modern warfare was like. He returned with a medal and a firm conviction. If the enemy comes to your homeland, you must be ready for anything. In the spring of 1940, the atmosphere in the village changed. Refugees arrived from the western regions, telling terrible stories about German atrocities in Poland. Vasily listened to these stories and understood that peaceful life was coming to an end. But no one could have imagined how terrible the reality would be. Even someone as experienced as Uncle Vasily could not have imagined that a year later, his entire family would be in the forest, fighting against the invaders. On June 22, 1941, war came to Borki with the whistling of bombs and the roar of aircraft. The first Luftwaffe raids took the village by surprise. The Korakh family, like all their fellow villagers, did not have time to evacuate. The front was moving too fast. By the end of June, German troops had occupied the area. With them came the occupation administration and police from among the local collaborators. The new order was established quickly and brutally. Vasily saw communists and Komsomol members being shot and young people being taken away to work in Germany. The first blow to the family was dealt by the police. Someone reported that Vasily Korak had served in the Red Army the previous year and had received awards. In the middle of the night, armed men broke into the house. Fortunately, Vasily managed to hide in the forest. A neighbor warned him, but the house was searched. All valuables were taken, and Maria and her sons were beaten. This was a turning point. Vasily realized that staying in the village meant certain death. He had to go into the forest and organize resistance. But what about his family? He couldn't leave his wife and children to their fate. And then Maria said the words that determined the fate of the whole family. "Wherever you go, we will go. We live together, and we will fight together." The decision was not an easy one. Cold, hunger, and constant danger awaited them in the forest. But there was no safety in the village either. Moreover, every day of delay increased the risk of arrest or execution. Their sons supported their parents. The eldest, Peter, even enthusiastically embraced the idea of guerrilla warfare. It took several days to prepare for their departure. They had to gather weapons, ammunition, warm clothes, and medicine. Vasily used his old connections, former colleagues who were also preparing for guerrilla warfare. Gradually, a group of like-minded people formed. The last night in their family home was difficult. Maria walked around the rooms, touching familiar things, realizing that she might be seeing them for the last time. Her sons silently gathered the most necessary items. Vasily checked his weapons. He had an old rifle left over from the Finnish War, and several grenades obtained by unknown means. On the morning of July 5, 1941, the Korakh family left their native village forever. They went into the forest, not knowing that 3 years of war lay ahead, in which each of them would become a hero. But even then, it was clear. Peaceful peasants were turning into resistance fighters. The forest did not welcome the Korakh family. The July rains turned the trails into a mess, and mosquitoes and gnats gave them no peace. They set up their first camp in a dense thicket, far from roads and settlements. They built a shelter out of branches and moss, a poor hut, but one that provided shelter from the rain and prying eyes. Other fugitives began to join Vasily. Red Army soldiers who had not managed to retreat, party workers, Komsomol members. Some came alone, others in small groups. By the end of July, there were already about 20 people. Everyone understood that they needed organization, discipline, and a plan of action. Vasily was unanimously elected commander. His military experience, knowledge of the area, and natural authority made the choice obvious. Maria was appointed as a nurse and quartermaster. Women's hands were indispensable in partisan life. The sons received weapons on an equal footing with the adults. The first operations were reconnaissance missions. It was necessary to study the location of German garrisons, find out the patrol regime, and find reliable contacts in the villages. Pyotr, as the most inconspicuous, often went on reconnaissance missions. His young face did not arouse suspicion among the occupiers. There was a catastrophic shortage of weapons. All the partisans had 5 rifles, 2 pistols, and a dozen or 2 grenades. Vasily understood that without serious weapons, the detachment was doomed to failure. They needed to obtain weapons from the enemy, but this required well-planned operations. The first success came unexpectedly. During reconnaissance, Ivan Korak stumbled upon a German convoy stuck in a swamp. There were only 3 soldiers guarding it. Vasily decided to attack. The operation was successful. They captured 2 machine guns, a box of ammunition, and food. This victory boosted the unit's morale. People believed that the Germans could be defeated. But Vasily understood that now the repression of the civilian population would begin. For every German killed, the Nazis would shoot dozens of hostages. The responsibility for the lives of his fellow villagers weighed heavily on the commander's shoulders. Maria was deeply distressed by what was happening. Seeing her sons with weapons, hearing talk of upcoming battles, all this contradicted her maternal instincts. But she understood that there was no other choice. The war did not ask for her opinion when it came to her native village. By the end of the summer of 1941, the Korakh family's partisan detachment already numbered 30 people. A long war lay ahead, in which ordinary people would have to become professional fighters. But the first steps had already been taken, and there was no turning back. Forming a real combat unit took months of hard work. Vasily Korakh understood that guerrilla warfare was not just about shooting and explosions, but above all about organization, discipline, and reconnaissance. It was necessary to create a structure capable of resisting the regular army of the occupiers. The unit was divided into groups according to specialization. Scouts gathered information about the movements of German troops and punitive operations. Demolitionists prepared mines and explosives. Snipers hunted for officers and signalmen. A medical team led by Maria Korak provided medical assistance. It took some time to establish contact with the mainland. It was not until September 1941 that they managed to establish radio contact with the center. From there came the first directives and promises of help. But most importantly, the detachment received official status and a number. Vasily's sons quickly showed themselves from their best side. Peter became the best scout in the detachment. His analytical mind and technical savvy helped plan complex operations. Ivan proved himself to be a natural saboteur, able to sneak into places where others did not dare to go. The youngest, Mikail, despite being only 17, became an excellent sniper. His patience and accuracy soon became legendary in the unit. The enemies nicknamed him the Forest Ghost. He appeared unexpectedly, shot accurately, and disappeared without a trace. Maria Korak also did not limit herself to medical duties. Her feminine charm helped her gather information in villages where it was deadly dangerous for a male partisan to appear. Under the guise of a merchant or refugee, she even penetrated regional centers from where she brought back valuable information. In the fall, serious operations began. The first major action was the blowing up of a railway bridge across the Niemen River. The operation was prepared for 2 weeks, studying security and patrol regimes. The success exceeded all expectations. Train traffic was paralyzed for 10 days. This victory was followed by repression. The Germans rounded up the population of the surrounding villages and shot every 10th person. Among the victims were the Korakh family's neighbors, people with whom they had lived their entire lives. These executions were a severe test for the whole family. But there was no stopping now. Every month of the war showed that the Nazis were systematically destroying the Belarusian people. The partisan struggle was becoming not just resistance, but a fight for the physical survival of the nation. And the Korakh family was at the forefront of this struggle. By the winter of 1941, Uncle Vasily's detachment already had 80 fighters and was considered one of the most combat-ready in the region. Years of difficult war lay ahead, but the foundation had been laid firmly. The winter of 1941 to 1942 was a severe test for the Korakh family's partisan detachment. The temperature dropped to -30 degrees. The snow was waist-deep, and there was a catastrophic shortage of food. Many fighters fell ill with scurvy and frostbite. Vasily decided to divide the detachment into small groups and scatter them across different forest bases. This made it easier to obtain food and evade German punitive operations. He himself settled with his family and the most experienced fighters in the remote Black Forest. Winter operations required special preparation and caution. Any footprints in the snow led straight to the partisan base. They had to use tricks, cover their tracks, walk along frozen streams, and get skis and sleds for a quick retreat after sabotage. The first major winter operation was carried out in January 1942. Intelligence reported a concentration of German equipment at the Molodechno station. Vasily decided to strike with the entire detachment. The operation took a month to prepare. On the night of January 15th, the partisans secretly approached the station. Pyotr Korakh and a group of demolition experts infiltrated the railway depot. At the same time, even attacked the ammunition depots. Mikail covered the retreat with a sniper rifle. The explosions went off almost simultaneously. 12 locomotives, 40 cars with military cargo, and the main fuel depot were destroyed. There were no casualties among the partisans. The Korakh family covered the retreat, acting as a single well-oiled machine. Maria played a key role in this operation. Disguised as a merchant, she studied the location of the guards and their shift schedule a week before the raid. Her intelligence allowed the operation to be planned with maximum efficiency. Her feminine intuition and powers of observation proved invaluable. The success of the Molodechno operation had far-reaching consequences. The German command was forced to transfer additional forces to the area, weakening other sections of the front. Soviet intelligence highly praised the actions of Uncle Vasily's detachment. But winter also brought the first serious losses. In February, during a German punitive operation, the deputy commander of the detachment, Sergei Pavlovsky, a close friend of the Korakh family, was killed. His death was a heavy blow to everyone, especially Maria, who considered Pavlovsky almost like a son. By the spring of 1942, the detachment had survived and remained combat-ready. Moreover, the winter trials had hardened the fighters, turning them into true professionals of guerrilla warfare. The Korakh family had survived the first winter of the war, but 2 more harsh winters lay ahead. Maria Korak became a legend of the Belarusian partisan movement during her lifetime. This small woman with kind eyes and an iron will proved that it is not only men who become heroes in war. Her story is about how a mother's love turns into merciless hatred for the enemies of the motherland. Before the war, Maria was an ordinary peasant woman. She ran the household, raised her sons, and helped her husband. But the occupation changed her beyond recognition. Seeing how the Nazis mocked civilians, how they shot children and old people, she realized that her maternal duty was not only to protect her own sons, but also to avenge all those who had died. In the partisan detachment, Maria quickly proved herself to be an indispensable fighter. Her main weapon was her inconspicuousness. A plump, middle-aged woman did not arouse the suspicion of the occupiers. Under the guise of a refugee or a merchant, she infiltrated the most heavily guarded facilities. Maria carried out her first serious reconnaissance operation in February 1942. Dressed as a beggar, she walked through the whole of Minsk, studying the location of German headquarters and warehouses. The information she brought back formed the basis for several major sabotage operations. But Maria really got famous after an operation in the city of Molodechno. Dressed as a saleswoman, she got a job in a canteen where German officers ate. For 3 weeks, she listened to their conversations, memorized their faces, and figured out their plans. Then she poisoned 7 high-ranking officials. The operation was carried out with surgical precision. Maria mixed poison into the soup that was served only at the officers' table. By that time, she had already left the city. The Germans searched for the poisoner for a long time, but her trail was lost in the forests. However, the fame of the Black Widow spread throughout the region. After this success, Maria began to specialize in eliminating traitors and collaborators. Her methods were varied: poison, explosives, cold weapons. She knew how to approach her target unnoticed and disappear without leaving a trace. The police feared her more than the armed partisans. Maria was especially cruel to those who betrayed the partisans. She personally eliminated several dozen informants. Each such operation saved the lives of her comrades in the detachment, including her own sons. Maria's motherly heart broke when she saw the suffering of other people's children. In the liberated villages, she took care of orphans whose parents had been killed by the occupiers. She effectively adopted many of these children. By the summer of 1942, the name Maria Korak was known throughout the Belarusian underground. Songs were written about her, and her name was used to scare the children of collaborators. But for her family, she remained simply a mother who washed her sons' gymnastic shirts and mended bullet holes. The war turned an ordinary peasant woman into a professional scout and saboteur. But most importantly, she managed to retain her humanity. And that is what made her not just an effective fighter, but a true hero. Pyotr Korakh, the eldest son of Uncle Vasily, became one of the best partisan commanders in Belarus by the age of 22. Tall, strong, with the analytical mind of an engineer and the intuition of a natural warrior, he embodied the best qualities of Soviet youth. Before the war, Pyotr worked as a mechanic on the railroad. His technical knowledge proved invaluable in the partisan struggle. He knew not only how to blow up a bridge or a locomotive, but also how to make the sabotage look like a technical malfunction. For a long time, the Germans could not understand why their equipment broke down so often. Pyotr received his first baptism of fire in August 1941, when his unit attacked a German convoy. The young partisan showed rare composure and accuracy in his shooting. From then on, his father began to entrust him with increasingly responsible tasks. In the spring of 1942, Peter led a sabotage group specializing in the destruction of railway infrastructure. In 2 months, his fighters blew up 18 bridges, derailed 37 trains, and destroyed 4 railway stations. Pyotr's most daring operation was a raid on the airfield in Borisov. Intelligence reported that 12 German Junkers, 88 bombers were based there. Destroying these aircraft would save the lives of hundreds of civilians. The operation took a month to prepare. Peter personally studied the location of the guards, the alarm system, and the flight schedule. The plan was daring: to infiltrate the airfield under the guise of a repair team and plant explosives in the aircraft. This required German uniforms, documents, and nerves of steel. On the night of June 10th, a group of 8 people under Peter's command made their way to the airfield. Dressed as German technicians, they calmly passed through the checkpoint. The guards did not even stop them. Who would suspect repairmen? In 2 hours, the partisans planted explosives in all 12 aircraft, the aviation fuel depot, and the radio station. The explosions went off simultaneously at 5 in the morning. The airfield was completely destroyed, and the Germans lost not only their aircraft, but also most of their flight crew. After this operation, the name of Peter Korakh became known to the entire partisan movement in the region. But fame did not go to his head. He understood that the war was just beginning, and that even more difficult trials lay ahead. In the summer of 1942, Pyotr married Anna Kozlova, a nurse from a neighboring detachment. The wedding was held in the forest, under the pine trees, among his comrades in arms. Machine gun belts served as a crown, and the wedding march was the song Katyusha. By the end of 1942, Peter was already commanding his own detachment of 40 fighters. But he did not separate himself from his family. All important operations were carried out together. Family ties did not weaken, but on the contrary, grew stronger under the fire of war. And that was the secret of their strength. Ivan Korakh, the middle son of the family, became a master of sabotage warfare at the age of 20. Short, agile, with a keen eye and quick reactions, he could penetrate places where larger fighters would inevitably fail. He specialized in operations behind enemy lines. Nature had blessed Ivan with the amazing ability to become invisible. He could lie in ambush for hours, blending in with the terrain. He was nicknamed the Forest Cat for his ability to move silently even on dry leaves. These qualities made him the best saboteur in the unit. Ivan carried out his first serious operation on his own in March 1942. The goal was difficult: to destroy an ammunition depot in a well-guarded garrison. He spent a week studying the facility, identifying weak spots in its defenses. Ivan managed to infiltrate the garrison through a sewer collector. He crawled through the foul-smelling pipe for an hour until he reached the warehouse. The explosives he planted detonated exactly at the appointed time. The explosion was so powerful that windows were blown out in a 3-kilometer radius. Ivan's special area of activity was the elimination of high-ranking collaborators. He studied their habits, routes of movement, and weak points in their security. Then he struck quickly and accurately, disappearing before his enemies realized what had happened. The most daring operation was the assassination of Kazimir Belsky, the mayor of Slutsk. This traitor had personally participated in the shootings of partisans and their families. Ivan was tormented by thoughts of revenge and spent a long time preparing for this operation. Belsky was cautious and rarely appeared in public, but he had a weakness. He loved to play cards in an underground casino. Ivan found out about this and decided to use it to his advantage. Dressed as a messenger, he entered the building where the game was taking place. The murder was carried out masterfully. Ivan threw a grenade into the room where Belsky was playing and jumped out of the window into the courtyard where a horse was waiting for him. By the time the guards reached the site of the explosion, the partisan had already disappeared into the forest. After this operation, the Germans offered a reward of 1,000 Reichsmarks for Ivan Korakh's head. His photo was posted at all outposts and command posts. But no one managed to catch the forest cat. He was too cunning and cautious. The war hardened Ivan's character, but did not embitter his soul. He never killed unnecessarily and always tried to avoid casualties among the civilian population. His principle was, strike the enemy, but remain human. By the winter of 1942, Ivan had become the commander of a special operations sabotage group. He had 12 of the best fighters in the unit under his command. They operated autonomously, receiving orders directly from headquarters via radio communication. Ivan's family remained his main source of support. Before each operation, he received his parents' blessing, and upon his return, he gave them a detailed account of the work he had done. His father was proud of his son, but he was constantly worried. The tasks Ivan performed were too dangerous. Mikail Korak, the youngest of the sons, despite being only 18 years old, was already considered one of the best snipers in the partisan movement in 1942. His accuracy became legendary, and his enemies nicknamed him the Forest Ghost. He would appear unexpectedly, shoot accurately at his target, and disappear without a trace. Mikhail's sniper skills did not come immediately. Before the war, he was fond of hunting, but shooting at people was radically different from hunting game. During his first months as a partisan, the young fighter learned to overcome psychological barriers, not allowing his emotions to affect the accuracy of his shots. Mikhail's mentor was former border guard Semyon Rybakov, who joined the unit in the fall of 1941. The experienced marksman passed on all the secrets of sniping to the young man, from proper preparation to calculating corrections for wind and humidity. Mikail made his first confirmed sniper shot in January 1942. The target was a German officer who was leading a punitive operation against civilians. The distance was 400 meters, the wind was sideways, and visibility was limited due to snowfall. The shot was perfect. The bullet hit the officer right in the heart, and he fell instantly. The punitive operation was thwarted, and the German soldiers retreated in panic, not understanding where the shot had come from. Mikail had already hidden in the thicket, leaving the enemy completely in the dark. Since then, sniper duels have become a regular part of Mikhail's life. The Germans sent their best shooters to destroy the Forest Ghost, but the young partisan was more cunning and experienced. He never fired from the same spot twice, constantly changing positions and tactics. Mikail became particularly famous for his duel with the German sniper Obersturmbannführer Klaus Weber, a veteran of the French campaign. Their duel lasted 3 days. Weber was experienced and patient, but Mikail knew the terrain better and used this advantage. The decisive shot was fired at dawn on the 3rd day. Weber took up position in the bell tower of a rural church, considering it an ideal place for an ambush. But Mikail had anticipated this move and prepared his response in advance. The Soviet sniper's bullet caught the German at the moment when he was aiming at a false target. By the summer of 1942, Mikail had 47 confirmed kills to his credit. Every shot was accurate and deadly, but most importantly, every one of his victims was a war criminal. Punitive forces, executioners, traitors. The war turned yesterday's schoolboy into a professional killer. But Mikail did not become embittered or lose his human qualities. In his spare time, he taught children from liberated villages to read and write, helped his mother in the hospital, and supported the morale of his comrades. Mikail's family was his main support. His father was proud of his younger son, although he worried about his fate. Sniper work was deadly dangerous. The Germans sent their best shooters against the forest ghost. By the end of 1942, Maria Korak had become so famous that his name was mentioned in German command reports. But the young sniper had no intention of stopping. There were still a year and a half of war ahead, and each of his shots brought victory closer. The winter of 1942 to 1943 was the most difficult period in the life of the Korakh family's partisan detachment. The frosts that winter broke all records, with the thermometer dropping to 40 degrees below zero. Snowstorms lasted for weeks, turning the forest into a white desert. Vasily decided to build a real underground base. They chose a location in a remote area, far from villages and roads. They dug dugouts 3 meters deep, reinforced them with logs, and made several exits in case of a sudden attack. The work took 2 months. Life for the partisan family in the dugout was harsh. They slept on bunks made of poles, covered with captured German greatcoats, and homemade blankets made of burlap. A potbelly stove provided heat, but the smoke had to be carefully concealed so as not to reveal the location of the base. Maria organized daily life with feminine practicality. She arranged for laundry, mending clothes, and cooking meals from meager supplies. She made soup from potato peelings and baked flatbread from quinoa. Every crumb counted. Hunger was a constant companion of the partisans. Medicines were especially difficult to come by. The wounded were treated with herbs and folk remedies. Maria studied the properties of forest plants and prepared tinctures and ointments. Her improvised pharmacy saved the lives of many fighters, including her own son Ivan, who was seriously wounded in December. Food was obtained through raids on villages controlled by the partisans. The peasants shared what little they had, understanding that without the support of the population, the partisan movement was doomed. But the help of civilians was limited. The occupiers systematically plundered the villages. Winter operations were rare, but well planned. Vasily understood that every sortie from the base was a risk for the entire detachment. Therefore, they only attacked important targets: warehouses, transport with ammunition, and groups of punitive forces. The most memorable was the New Year's operation. Intelligence reported that the Germans were preparing a big celebration in the district center. Vasily decided to spoil the enemy's holiday. On the night of December 31st to January 1st, the partisans attacked the German garrison. The operation was carried out without any losses. They destroyed a radio station, blew up a food warehouse, and seized weapons and ammunition. Most importantly, they boosted the morale of the detachment. People believed that even in the most difficult times, it was possible to defeat the enemy. They welcomed the new year of 1943 in a dugout, by the light of oil lamps. Maria baked a cake from rye flour and decorated it with fir branches. Vasily made a toast to victory, to family, and to the motherland. Everyone understood that there were still many difficulties ahead, but together they would overcome everything. Winter tempered their characters and brought people together. The Korakh family set an example for the entire detachment. Their dugout became a center of attraction. Important issues were decided here, operations were planned, and morale was maintained. By the spring of 1943, the detachment had not only survived but grown stronger. The trials of winter had turned the partisans into true professionals. They had learned to fight in any conditions, relying only on themselves and their comrades in arms. The spring of 1943 brought new opportunities for the partisan movement. The successes of the Red Army at Stalingrad and on the Kursk Bulge inspired the partisans to undertake large-scale operations. Uncle Vasily's detachment was tasked with paralyzing rail traffic in their area. Operation Rail War became the largest action of Korakh's detachment. The plan called for simultaneous strikes on several sections of the Minsk-Brest Railway. The goal was not simply to blow up the tracks, but to put the entire transport artery out of commission for a long time. Preparation took a month. Scouts studied the train schedule, the location of guards, and the communication system. The saboteurs prepared special mines that would explode not immediately, but after a certain time after the train had passed. This made repair work difficult. The Korakh family acted as a single mechanism. Vasily coordinated the operation, Peter directed the demolition work, Ivan provided security, and Mikail covered the retreat. Maria organized medical support and communication with the population. On the night of August 15, 1943, the operation began. 7 railway bridges, 12 kilometers of track, and 4 stations were blown up simultaneously. Train traffic was paralyzed on a 100-kilometer stretch of track. The Germans threw enormous forces at the task of repairing the damage. But every night, the partisans struck again. The repaired sections were blown up again. The railroad turned into a continuous zone of combat operations. The delayed action mines invented by Peter Korakh proved to be particularly effective. They exploded under passing trains carrying supplies for the front. In 1 month, 23 trains carrying military equipment and ammunition were derailed by such surprises. The success of the Rail War was of strategic importance. The German command was forced to transfer additional forces to the rear, weakening the front. The supply of Army Group Center was seriously hampered during the decisive battles. But large-scale operations required sacrifices. In September 1943, during a raid on a railway station, one of the best fighters in the unit, Nikolai Petrov, a close friend of the Korakh family, was killed. His death was painful for everyone, especially Mikail, who considered Petrov his older brother. In the fall of 1943, the detachment took part in Operation Bagration, a large-scale partisan offensive coordinated with the actions of regular troops. The task was to disrupt enemy communications and prevent them from retreating in an organized manner. The Korakh family fought at the forefront of the offensive. They liberated their native villages and saw the consequences of 3 years of occupation. The scenes of destruction and atrocities strengthened their determination to fight the enemy until it was completely destroyed. By the winter of 1943, Uncle Vasily's detachment controlled an area of more than 1,000 square kilometers. It was a real partisan republic, with its own laws, authorities, and armed forces. And at its head was a simple peasant family from the village of Borki. The year 1944 brought the Korakh family not only hope for a quick victory, but also the heaviest losses of the entire war. The Germans, realizing the inevitability of defeat, acted with desperate cruelty, seeking to destroy as many partisans and civilians as possible. The first tragedy occurred in February. During the operation to liberate the concentration camp in Trostenets, Pyotr Korakh was seriously wounded. A mine fragment shattered his leg, and he developed blood poisoning. Maria fought for her eldest son's life for 3 weeks. But there were not enough medicines. Pyotr's death was a terrible blow to the whole family. Vasily aged 10 years overnight. Maria was unable to speak for 3 days due to her grief. Ivan and Mikail swore to avenge their brother. But the worst thing was that the unit had lost one of its best commanders on the eve of decisive battles. Peter was buried in the forest, under an old pine tree. A simple wooden cross was placed on the grave with the inscription, Peter Korakh, Hero. Eldest son Vasily gave a speech in which he said that his son had not died in vain. He had brought victory closer with his exploits. In the spring, Operation Bagration began, the liberation of Belarus. The partisans were tasked with preventing the Germans from retreating in an organized manner, destroying retreating columns and capturing crossings and road junctions. Korakh's detachment operated in the direction of the main strike. On July 1st, 1944, the partisans attacked a German column retreating from Borisov. The battle was fierce. The enemies resisted desperately, knowing that capture meant execution for war crimes. Ivan Korakh was fatally wounded in this battle. He was hit by a burst of automatic fire as he rushed toward a German machine gun embrasure. The middle son's last words were, "Mom, I avenged Peter." He died in Maria's arms just 2 weeks before the liberation of his native village. The loss of 2 sons nearly broke Vasily. He wanted to give up his command and leave people behind. But Maria found the strength to say to her husband, "Our sons died for their country. We must finish what they started." These words restored Vasily's will to fight. Mikail, now the only son left, took responsibility for his parents. At 18, he became deputy commander of the detachment. The war turned the young man into an adult, but did not embitter his heart. The battles of July 1944 were the last for Uncle Vasily's unit. The Red Army advanced so quickly that the partisans had to literally run to catch up with the regular troops and hand over control of the liberated territory to them. On July 13th, the advanced units of the 3rd Belarusian Front entered the village of Borki. The Korakh family greeted the liberators on the ashes of their native home. 3 years of war, the loss of 2 sons, hundreds of operations. All this was behind them. But the war was not over yet. Ahead lay the march to the west, the liberation of Europe from fascism. And the Korakh family was ready to go all the way. The memory of their fallen sons gave them strength for new feats. The connection with the mainland was vital for the Korakh family's partisan detachment. Without support from the center, Without coordination with the actions of regular troops, the partisan struggle turned into scattered actions that could not seriously influence the course of the war. The detachment received its first radio transmitter in November 1941. It was a captured German radio, modified by the skilled hands of communications specialist Fyodor Kuznetsov. Transmissions were only possible at night, and communication sessions lasted no more than 10 minutes. The radio station was located in a specially equipped bunker, camouflaged among the swamps. The antenna was stretched between trees only during communication sessions, then carefully removed. The Germans were constantly searching for partisan radios with the help of direction-finding machines. Radio communications were used to transmit orders for sabotage operations, reports from the front lines, and political news. Vasily Korakh personally received all important messages, decrypted them, and passed them on to the group commanders. Secrecy was absolute. Communication became especially important during the preparation for Operation Rail War. The center coordinated the actions of hundreds of partisan detachments, set the start time for operations, and specified targets. Without this coordination, mass sabotage would have been impossible. In addition to radio communication, there was a system of couriers. Trusted individuals carried letters, maps, and photographs across the front line. It was extremely dangerous. The Germans shot couriers on sight. But communication was maintained at all costs. Maria Korak often served as a courier. Her feminine charm and ability to transform herself made her indispensable for such tasks. Disguised as a refugee or a merchant, she traveled hundreds of kilometers, carrying important documents to neighboring units. In the spring of 1943, Colonel Ivan Banov, a representative of the central headquarters of the partisan movement, arrived at the detachment's base. He assessed the activities of Korakh's detachment as exemplary and offered Vasily a promotion, appointment as commander of the partisan unit. Vasily refused the promotion. He explained it this way: "My family is fighting here, on our native land. We know every path, every house. This is where our strength lies." Banov understood the wisdom of the simple peasant and did not insist. In the summer of 1944, on the eve of Operation Bagration, communication with the center became even more intense. Daily reports were received on the movement of German troops, plans for the offensive, and tasks for the partisans. Korakh's detachment was given a particularly important task. They were tasked with capturing and holding the bridge across the Berezina River until the main forces of the Red Army arrived. The operation was difficult and dangerous, but it was Korakh's family who was entrusted with this responsible mission. Their reliability had been proven over 3 years of war. The last radio communication session took place on July 13, 1944. Vasily reported to the center, "The task has been completed. The bridge has been captured and held. We have joined forces with the regular troops. The detachment is now at the disposal of the front commander." The partisan war was over for the Korakh family. The liberation of their homeland was both a joyful and bitter moment for the Korakh family. On July 13, 1944, the advanced units of the 3rd Belarusian Front entered the village of Borki. What the liberators saw shocked even the seasoned frontline soldiers. All that remained of the village were charred chimneys and foundations overgrown with nettles. The Germans had burned Borki in 1942 in retaliation for partisan activity. 70 people were killed, including the elderly and children. The survivors were taken to Germany. Vasily Korakh stood on the ashes of his native home and wept. 3 years of war, the loss of 2 sons, hundreds of operations, all for this moment. But the joy of liberation was overshadowed by the scale of the destruction. It was necessary to rebuild not only houses, but also lives. The front command highly appreciated the activities of the Korakh family's partisan detachment. Vasily was awarded the rank of major and offered to remain in the army. Maria received the first-class partisan of the Patriotic War Medal. Mikail was offered to enter a military school. But the family chose a peaceful life. Too much blood had been shed. Too much had been lost. Vasily said, "We fought for the right to live peacefully on our native land. Now that right has been won. Let's rebuild the village." The first thing they did was build a house on the site of the burned one. Veterans, partisans from other units, and local residents helped. The house turned out to be larger than the previous one, in memory of their fallen sons, Peter and Ivan. Their photographs took pride of place on the wall. It took several years to rebuild the village. Vasily headed the village council and organized the construction of a school, a hospital, and a club. Maria worked as a paramedic, using the medical knowledge she had gained in the partisan detachment. Mikail became a teacher. In 1946, a monument to the fallen villagers was unveiled in Borki. The names of all the victims of the occupation, including Peter and Ivan Korakh, were carved on a granite slab. Vasily gave a speech. "They died so that we could live. It is our duty to remember special attention was paid to working with young people." Vasily and Maria regularly spoke at schools, telling stories about the war, the partisan struggle, and the price of freedom. Mikail wrote a book of memoirs about the family unit, which became popular in the area. Life was getting back to normal, but the wounds of war healed slowly. At night, Maria dreamed of her dead sons. Vasily often went into the forest, to the sites of former partisan bases, and sat there in silence for a long time. Mikail could not get used to the peaceful silence after the roar of war. In 1948, a film crew came to the village to shoot a movie about the partisans. The Korakh family advised the filmmakers and shared their memories. The film turned out to be truthful and powerful, showing the war without embellishment. By the 1950s, Borki had become a model village. It had a 10-year school, a hospital, a cultural center, and a library. But most importantly, it was home to people who had lived through the war and retained their humanity. This was the best memorial to those who had died. The Korakh family became a symbol of the indomitable spirit of the Soviet people. Their story proved that even in the most difficult times, it is possible to preserve human dignity and faith in the victory of good over evil. This was their greatest victory. The post-war fate of the Korakh family became an example of how war heroes found their place in peacetime life. Vasily Ivanovich lived to be 83 years old, remaining an active public figure and keeper of the memory of the partisan movement until his last days. After the war, Vasily worked as the chairman of the Krasnaya Zvezda collective farm, which was created on the basis of the restored villages in the district. Under his leadership, the farm became one of the best in the region, but he considered his main achievement to be not the harvests, but the education of young people. Maria Stepanovna lived to be 90 years old, working as a paramedic and midwife. She delivered hundreds of babies and saved many lives. The people called her Mama Maria, an expression of their universal respect for this remarkable woman. The family paid special attention to preserving the memory of their fallen comrades. In 1965, on the 20th anniversary of Victory Day, a museum of partisan glory was opened in Borki. The entire family created the exhibition, collecting documents, photographs, and personal belongings of the fighters. Mikail Vasilyevich became a famous writer and journalist. His book, Family in the Fire of War, has been reprinted many times and translated into dozens of languages. In it, he told the truth about the partisan war, without embellishment, but with deep respect for the exploits of ordinary people. In the 1960s, a real pilgrimage to the Korakh family began. Delegations from different republics, foreign journalists and filmmakers came to Borki. Vasily welcomed everyone, patiently answered questions, and showed them the battle sites. Particularly touching were the meetings with the children of the fallen partisans. Many of them became famous people: scientists, military personnel, writers. They considered Vasily and Maria their adoptive parents, visited regularly, and kept in touch. In 1975, Vasily Korak was awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. At a solemn ceremony in the Kremlin, he said, "This award belongs not only to me, but to all the partisans, to all who fought for the freedom of the motherland." After Vasily's death in 1982, Maria continued his work. She ran the museum, met with young people, and participated in patriotic events. Until her last days, she retained a clear memory and a firm belief in justice. Mikail lived a long life, passing away in 2005 at the age of 80. His children and grandchildren continued the family tradition of serving their country. Many became military personnel, teachers, and doctors. Today, there is a memorial complex called Partisan Glory in Borki. Thousands of people come here to pay tribute to the memory of the heroes. The story of the Korakh family has become part of school textbooks, and films and books have been made about it. The main lesson of the Korakh family's story is that even in the most difficult times, people can retain their dignity and humanity. The war did not embitter them or make them cruel. They remained human beings in the full sense of the word. The memory of the feat of the partisan family from the village of Borki will live forever. It reminds us that heroes are not chosen, but ordinary people who make the right choice at a critical moment. Choices in favor of goodness, justice, and love for their homeland. Today, when the world is once again facing threats and challenges, the story of the Korakh family is more relevant than ever. It teaches us that family is not only blood ties, but also unity of spirit and a willingness to sacrifice for the common cause. This is the force that can defeat any evil.